We're live.
Great, thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. Good to see you back. I know we probably have a few people that are going to be joining us in the next couple of minutes, but I am going to start because we have a lot to get through today. So if you wouldn't mind grabbing a pen and a piece of paper or somewhere to take notes, we will try our very, very best to get to a point where we can answer some questions at the end. So I'm going to move through these slides pretty quickly. What you're going to see today is pretty much the almost final draft of the board presentation that will happen on the 21st. Along with this is about a 35-page supplementary document that includes a lot more detailed information. So when we present this to the board, the next step will be to send out the bigger document and possibly an executive summary so the community can have kind of a cheat sheet on what the plan is going to be for the fall. But there's a lot in here. So like I said, we are going to get right to it. And basically our agenda today is to go through draft 2 and give you a chance to ask your questions. So as we know, this has been our goal from the beginning. We have some assumptions that we've been working on as we develop our plan. A couple of the assumptions that have needed to be adjusted are, we have got to have, in order for this to work, at least 20% of our students need to be staying home. So we've kind of recognized that at this point we need to have a group that decides to be remote. We know that as we go in person, the process for evaluating who can and should be in school based on illness will take a lot of time. So as we monitor kind of what's happening in other districts and around us, that process is long indeed and takes a lot of steps to get through. And we are assuming that our staff, faculty, parents, and community will be honest with us about close contact, positive diagnosis, and symptoms. So just knowing that we need to be all in this together on the honor system so that we can work together to make sure everyone stays safe with the in-school option. As we talked about last time, we have some generally accepted information about COVID-19 and transmission. We won't go through that again. And we know we have some decision-making guiding principles, student and staff safety and well-being being at the top, as well as social emotional support, academic achievement and growth, and support of our community. So here is our draft 2. We talked a little bit about making calendar adjustments. At this point, we have met with our district calendar committee, and we would like to allow for 5 additional days in the beginning of the year, 5 days in the beginning of the year to have our teachers have an opportunity for professional development and planning. So at this point, the calendar is going to be August 18th, 19th, and 20th will be regular Teacher Institute days. 2 of them were already scheduled and 1 is being moved from later in the year to upfront. And we are adding in 2 remote learning planning days. We have 5 of those that we're able to take from the state. So we're going to put those at August 21st and 24th and back the student start date up a little bit to August 25th. We are going to offer community choice to either be in person or remote. And we are at this point going to be asking the community if they would like to be contacted for a hybrid schedule. In other words, if they would like to have their children come a couple of days a week or 2 to 3 days a week, that would only be able to be accommodated depending on what other families choose. We do want to emphasize that even if students choose to be in person, there will be a remote component to their school day as well, because as you will find out, our in-person day is going to be shortened. Either way, though, remote or in person, we are looking for consistency in programming so that there can be seamless transitions between in-person and remote learning. As we know, there will be the potential for individuals or classrooms or our school to have to move from an in-person to a remote situation given what happens with the virus. So these are the consistent features. Our curriculum will be consistent. All students will be assessed at the beginning of the year and throughout in order to address the learning gaps that have been created by this situation and so that we can continue to differentiate. All students will be held to the same instructional outcomes and the same content will be covered. For remote learners, we will be offering some materials pickup time so that we can make the experience as close to the in-person experience as possible with the materials that parents would need at home. We would like to have a consistent learning management system for all classrooms. So that would be Google Classroom. We did use it for some grades last year for some classrooms, but we also had others. We are at this point going to streamline it to Google Classroom. Grading and accountability. All students, remote and in person, will be held to the same grading system in and out of school. And we know that we promised a hybrid standards-based reporting report card at the middle school level that will be in effect for the beginning of fall 2020. And all students, remote and in person, will have access to the same software and online programming. So let's take a look at what remote learning will look like. What will the school year look like? I'm sorry, the school day look like for remote learners? Early childhood. Can you see my email? Did that just pop up? No? Okay, we're still good. So early childhood would have two time periods, 8:30 to 10:50 in the morning or 12:20 to 2:45. You're going to see this little disclaimer on each of the schedules. The daily percentages of synchronous and asynchronous time, meaning face-to-face live instruction or independent or pre-recorded instruction, those percentages will vary depending on the learning activity and the needs of the students, but both will occur daily. And the synchronous start times will be consistent from day to day, not necessarily the length of the synchronous sessions, but those start times we're going to aim to be consistent every day so that remote families who are working remotely will be able to depend on the same time each day to log in for those synchronous sessions. For early childhood and pre-kindergarten program, we're looking for a daily morning meeting. And then the instruction will be based on the student needs and the student's IEPs. The synchronous instruction will be provided in small groups or one-to-one sessions. That's something we knew worked better last year. And we are considering how we can provide some limited specials opportunities, which would also be provided remotely. In grades K to 5, the learning day for synchronous instruction would begin at 10 and end at 2:50. Again, those percentages will vary, but the start times for synchronous sessions would be the same every day. And the schedule would be some kind of classroom daily check-in meeting. You have the times for math, ELA, social emotional learning, science and social studies, daily wellness. And so those are total time periods mixed between synchronous and asynchronous. We'd like to give teachers some flexibility to know whether to be able to adjust depending on the needs of the student. Did it not switch?
It did not switch. We're still looking at the early childhood side.
Let me stop my share and try again. Hold on. Give me a second. I don't know what happened. Sorry about this. I have my team there helping me out.
I'm happy to try to present it if that's helpful, Lisa. I do have it up.
Let me try one more time. Let's see if this works. Is that better?
Yes.
All right, so K to 5, 10 to 2:50, and you can see there what the times are that we would be looking at for daily check-ins, math, ELA, social emotional learning, science and social studies, et cetera. So those time periods, though, then again are going to be broken into synchronous opportunities over Zoom. Zoom will be our common platform for that. And then some independent and pre-recorded opportunities for students within that time period as well. Did it switch to 6 to 8? Okay, so our middle school schedule looks like this. In phase 4 for remote learning, so when we are having some kids in school and some kids remote, we are going to be shifting to a block schedule where we would be looking for an average amount of time in math, ELA, science, and social studies each week, but they would be blocked. Students would not have every class every day while we're in phase 4. When we shift to phase 3, we're looking at an adjustment in that so that students would have instruction in each of the core areas every day. And that just has to do with the fact that in phase 4, we are trying to run in-person instruction as well as remote instruction. So these are cumulative amounts of minutes between asynchronous and synchronous activities. So what that means is there will be a percent of time that's spent in live instruction. Students are then going to have work that they will need to do independently outside of that synchronous instruction in a remote environment. adding up to approximately these minutes for the week or for every 2 weeks. So we know when we assign work to be done independently or outside of the classroom, that's going to depend on the student's pace and their ability to move through the work. These are average amounts of time that we expect students to be spending in each of these core areas every week. Students with special needs, we are obviously looking to address the needs of our most struggling students that need the most support. So we will obviously work to ensure that we are providing FAPE to all of our students who have IEP plans, individualized education programs, 504 plans. We'll continue to assess. We are working with our related service providers who will be working with some students in person and some remotely. We have developed strategies to ensure that social emotional wellness is a priority for these students. And we will be continuing with our ELL programming regardless of in-person or remote instruction. So let's take a look at what it would look like in person. So for the students choosing to be remote, those were the schedules. What does the student day look like in person? Students will be able to attend school 5 days a week, and there will still continue to be some remote components. So the remote learning schedule for synchronous time is going to coincide a lot with this schedule. It's going to be the exact same time of the day that synchronous instruction will be taking place. And then both groups, remote and in person, will have work to do outside of that school day, because as you can see, these are shortened times. We are going with a late start option every day because we share transportation with other districts. So that means we can't do an early release. I know there are some other districts that are doing an early release. We are unable to do that because we share transportation. However, the Lake Bluff Park District will be offering childcare for students before school for the families that need that beginning at our normal time. And we are also looking into employee childcare options as well. We want to keep in mind that our staff also has students who are also involved in other school districts whose plans don't look like ours. Every district has local control. And the reason for that is because we all have different facilities, different amounts of money, different staffing, different programming. And so we anticipate that we will have some staff impacted by closures and quarantines in other school districts where their own children go to school. So we again are looking to provide some support for them as well. So looking at what our physical environment will look like for in-person instruction, we are going to be organized to allow for as close to 6-foot distance between students to the best of our ability. Our students will be grouped and stay in their own classroom, and this is middle school also, in one classroom as much as possible, and teachers will rotate to the students as needed so that we can limit the number of interactions in the hallways and interactions between students and teachers. We are in the process of clearing non-essential furniture, especially furniture that's soft and that can retain fluids of any kind. So we're looking to get rid of those. We will not be sharing supplies and materials, and we will probably be using some uncommon classroom spaces as classrooms so that we can keep students as far apart as possible. And we are looking to provide some instruction and mask breaks to occur outside as the weather permits. Lunchroom, at this point, we will most likely be having students eat in the classroom. Food will be available only for pre-purchase, so we're not going to be doing any direct sales. It will be pre-packaged and individually served. We will not be sharing desks in the classroom, and if we are in tables, we will have plastic desk shields. So students will be sitting in their spot to eat their lunch. And so students with allergies should be able to sit in class with their friends and eat, because they will technically be at their own table. So that's helpful. We will keep students physically distanced while they eat so that their masks can be removed. Obviously, probably after we have assisted younger students with opening things and doing what they need to do for lunch. And obviously we'll be working with students who have individual health plans or food allergies that go above and beyond what this plan provides for, and increase sanitation and personal protective equipment for the staff that will be supervising lunches. We will continue to have recess and have our playgrounds open in phase 4. We'll have outdoor recess, movement breaks, as much as we can outside. We will be keeping classes of students distant from each other. So the guidelines have The group sizes of less than 50 have to be 30 feet apart from each other. So we'll be watching those distances between groups. We'll work to engage them in games and activities that keep them not touching each other, but engaged. And we'll keep our playgrounds open. Students will be able to remove their masks as much as they remain physically distant from each other. We will kind of be talking to the kids a lot about watching their distance, washing their hands, and wearing their masks, the 3 W's that our governor has been talking about. In terms of our restrooms, we will have a lot of signage. We'll have ways for kids to measure whether they're standing 6 feet apart. Face coverings will be required. We'll be looking to have only one student in a bathroom at a time if possible, scheduling regular bathroom breaks and hand washing breaks as possible, and cleaning high touch areas throughout the day. We know using the restroom is a human right. We need to allow students to do that when they need to. The additional precautions are going to be top of mind though. Hallways, main office, common spaces, again, the signage that will help people to know 6 feet distancing, face coverings required at all times. And we are going to try to restrict students to a certain area of the building so we don't have too much mixing and traveling, as well as continuing to sanitize. Gyms and locker rooms will not be using locker rooms. We want to encourage physical education. Kids are going to need it. We'll be doing it outside as much as possible, using partitions inside when we need to. We'll be asking that there's no handshaking, high fives, other things like that. Asking PE teachers to use a loud voice or a microphone so that they can stay distanced. And then obviously when we cannot have individual equipment, when things need to be shared, we will have students and staff washing their hands, sanitizing equipment, and in between each use. Our health offices. So we have already solicited volunteers and we will be hiring temporary additional help for our health offices in each building. We know that flu season is normally a busy time in the nurse's office. We're anticipating it will get even busier. We will be following ISB guidelines, obviously. We are going to be separating and having various health offices throughout the building. When students come for their medication, they will not be in the same spot as a student who is symptomatic. We'll have different places for those students. And then we ask that when a student is identified as having symptoms and needing to be picked up, that they would come as quickly as possible, because we will be supervising those students in an individualized setting so that they are remaining isolated from other students. All of this is about face masks. We have to wear face masks. We are going to be providing some face masks. We encourage people to bring face masks that fit over the nose and the mouth. We will be doing as many breaks as possible. We have some guidance in here about, taking care when you remove, not to be touching the front, washing them regularly. And we can take them off when students are outside if we're maintaining a physical distance. We cannot use face shields in lieu of face masks unless there's a medical condition, but we can certainly add them on top of face masks for additional protection when students and teachers will be in close contact, potentially in therapy situations. We also are providing the individual plexiglass trifold desk shields for all students. We'll be requiring additional hand washing and hand sanitizing during the day. We're encouraging students to bring water bottles, looking at locking down the water fountain portion of the fountains, but instead using the water bottles. We'll provide cups if they forget. And we're reviewing our ventilation systems, and seating charts will be in every situation. The reason for that we'll be assigning students to places is because we are going to, when we get into the situation where we have a positive case, we need to do contact tracing and we need to know exactly where kids have been and who they've been around. So there will be assigned seating, and there won't be a lot of choice for where students can be during the day. Obviously, we're looking at additional sanitation, the creation of isolation rooms, which I talked about, and repurposing of space, some spaces in the building so that we can ensure the appropriate social distancing. And we're asking any community events, which I don't see there being a lot, but obviously adhering to the same regulations. We will be asking parents to certify wellness of their children every day. Self-certification is allowable by the guidance. We will be utilizing some kind of technology. There's a lot of new platforms that are being developed right now. So we're watching that, and more information will come. We will be asking you to certify that your child does not have COVID, has not been in close contact with somebody who's had a positive diagnosis, and has not traveled to a COVID hotspot. The health departments are identifying states and other areas that are experiencing high levels of positive cases, and that will be a cue not to come to school, as well as all the other symptoms that are listed here. We will not be conducting daily temperature checks unless a student is exhibiting some kind of symptom. We have to remember also that just because a student is asymptomatic does not mean that they are not, that they don't have the virus. And so the essential part of this is that they're wearing their mask and they're keeping their distance from other students and teachers. Anyone with a temperature of 100.4, if they're sent to the nurse and need to have their symptoms checked or showing other signs, will be isolated, and we will be asking parents to come pick them up. And we will be requiring some testing before they're able to come back. When we do have a confirmed COVID-19 case, we will be following the procedures set forth by our Lake County Health Department. We will immediately be contacting them. They will assist us in determining the proper course of action. We will be looking at close contacts, which is less than 6 feet away. Anyone who is less than 6 feet away for more than 15 minutes cumulative. That means if 3 minutes here, 4 minutes there, 5 minutes there within the last 3 to 4 days, masked or unmasked. Doesn't matter if the mask was on, it's still considered close contact. And they will be alerted and asked to isolate at that point. Students or staff self-quarantining with a positive diagnosis will need to stay home for at least 10 days and be fever-free for 3 days after symptoms have resolved or the 2 negative tests. At least 10 days and then the negative test, but there have to be 3 symptom-free days without medication. And I cannot emphasize this enough. I know that it will be difficult when we have a positive case. People are going to want to know who it is. We cannot name the individuals who have reported a positive case. That's a HIPAA violation, and we will not be doing that. And obviously, as the guidelines shift and adjust, we will potentially be needing to shift our guidelines as well. We hope to have some extracurriculars this year, but they will probably look a little bit different. Some might be virtual, maybe some things that we did in the spring. We'll continue to do sports and academic competitions if we can. We're going to be watching the guidance on that. As I'm sure you've been watching, athletic camps have been a real trouble spot this summer for some of our neighboring districts. Visitors to school will be restricted to authorized personnel only. They will need to wear a face covering and report directly to the main office for a wellness screening, including a temperature check. So we will be checking temperatures of visitors who are coming to the office. They will be asked to stay in the main office to conduct their business if we can. Otherwise, we'll be restricting them to a certain part of the building where they need to be. We will be trying to conduct all parent meetings virtually. So the IEP meetings, parent-teacher conferences, we want to conduct those virtually unless there's a reason that we cannot. Okay, so by July 30th, parents will need to complete a form. So what's going to happen now in terms of a timeline is this will be presented to the Board of Education on the 21st. We will have faculty meetings on the 22nd with our teachers so that we can answer their questions. The form will be sent home to parents along with the supplementary guidance. And again, there's 35 pages of supplementary documentation for this plan that will be sent home on the 24th. We'll be asking parents if they want to attend a virtual Q&A session with the administrative team on the 27th. That's listed here. And then by July 30th, we'll be asking for their election and begin calling folks on August 3rd who haven't responded, because we cannot do class lists or really start digging into the finer points of this plan until we know who's elected what. And I have to emphasize, if the response to our plan is significantly different in terms of the number of students either in or out, we may have to pivot a little bit depending on what we can handle. So that's just a disclaimer. What is all this going to cost us? We are keeping track of our costs. I don't have a cumulative total right now, but we'll be reporting and providing information to our Board of Education and community as we prepare and continue to order equipment to keep everyone safe. Obviously, personal protective equipment, additional technology, internet for our families that need that. We are looking for tents to provide more outdoor classroom space, which will be a cost. Some screening and surveillance costs in terms of the equipment we would need for our health professionals, the apps we would need for parents to fill out the screening information. extra staff for our health offices, et cetera. So those all add up. And before we get to the Q&A, I just want to emphasize that there's been a lot of input into this plan. The faculty and staff who have spent their off time in the summer on the phone with us, working through schedules, talking through feedback with us, being representatives and bringing information back and forth. I cannot thank you enough. It's invaluable. Our nurses constantly supporting, looking for resources, forwarding information. Our administrative support staff here at the district office have been working so hard to make sure that everything goes smoothly. This group right here, you guys are an invaluable resource to us. I've been meeting with our community partners. Village of Lake Bluff is going to be supporting us 100% with additional campaigning around face masks and really, really encouraging the village in its entirety to be wearing the protective equipment that they need to out in the community. We definitely have a sense from our community that they're nervous because not everyone is handling this in the same way. So the village is 100% aligned with us and supporting getting that word out. The Park District offering us support for childcare and just being completely flexible. The public library we've talked to, they want to keep supporting us with our intergovernmental agreement. We've had support from Lake Forest Hospital in terms of reviewing our plans and safety measures. And obviously I've been in contact with Lake Forest District 67 and 115 regularly. Parents and community who have sent their feedback, sent emails, asked questions. It's all helpful. It all helps us inform our plan. Obviously the support of the Board of Education, and I can't overemphasize how amazing the administrative team is here. They've been working nonstop all summer through transitions, working with their staff, working in their new positions, and this plan is 100% come together because of their hard work. So with that, I made it in less than a half an hour, and we're going to ask some questions now because I wanted to give you time. The one thing I have to say is we're all going to have to be flexible this year. I'm sure you've been following social media and looking at the news. It's unpredictable to say the least. I'm not sure of anything except that our guidance will change. That's one thing I know. And we're going to have to be really flexible and understand that sometimes we're not going to have a lot of notice before we need to pivot, especially if cases start to become apparent and we start to have a situation like some of our neighbors have had. So I will apologize right now for the inconvenience that's going to cause, and I know it will. So with that, what questions do you have?
I have a question about the distancing. I know it's dependent on how many elect to be in person, but what efforts are we going to make? I feel like the language is a little vague about what we're aiming for. So if, for example, we have 20 kids in a class, would we possibly consider doing an AB schedule so that there wouldn't be such close proximity, or how are we?
Yeah, so we're aiming for 6 feet, as close to 6 feet as we can. And that's where I went with, if our response to this, if we get more people who want to be in person, then we're going to have to adjust. I don't know exactly what that looks like. It could look like a hybrid schedule, AB schedule. It probably will not be an AM PM schedule because that's hard for disinfecting in between groups. But we may have to look at more of a hybrid schedule like that, depending on the response we get. It's a great question, Jackie.
For the childcare at the Park District, I know in years past, ARC hasn't taken the pre-K kiddos. Will pre-K age children be able to take advantage of the Park District childcare as well?
I believe so, but I'm going to check into that.
Thank you.
Lisa, will the staff be the same who is conducting the all online versus those who are doing in person?
That's a good question. So some of that is going to depend on how many kids we have out and how many we have in, as well as how many staff we have out and in. So we are going to be looking to do, is, like I said, the schedules are going to be the same, whether you're remote or in person. So logging on for that direct instruction should be the same every day. It could look a couple of ways. It could be live streamed from the classroom for direct instruction, where the students who are remote would see the teacher and be present for the live instruction, say 15, 20 minutes. And then they would be shifted into a breakout room with another instructor that would be able to support them with their personal needs or any questions that they have to differentiate. That would be if we had enough kids for most of our teachers to be in person. If we have more kids remote than we have in person, then we may shift some of our personnel over to a remote learning only platform. And then that teacher would be consistent with the teachers, with the students who are in remote. Does that make sense? A lot of it is going to depend on who elects to do what, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is that we're aiming for the schedule to be the same every day for remote kiddos. So each time they log in for that live instruction over the course of a day, that would be the same time. The staffing, I'm not sure about consistency for that. We know it's important, and we'll be working to try and do it as much as we can. The other issue with streaming into classrooms is just the tech component of it and making sure that that camera is only focused on the teacher and that it really is direct instruction, just teacher talk. And then when the classroom, the students who are physically in person there start talking, that's when the Zoom session ends and we bring people out to their platforms. You know, the remote classroom setup kind of starts up and the in-person kind of keeps going. But that's one way we'd like to keep that curriculum the same, because at some point we're all going to be in phase 3 is my guess. We're all going to be back to remote. And then hopefully that remote schedule will stay the same for the kids who have been in remote. And that similar schedule feels similar to the kids who have been in school because that's the schedule they've been on as well.
Lisa, I'm confused by that. Will the same staff member then be preparing materials and lessons for both a remote group of kids and their in-person group of kids?
So what the goal is to have both groups experience the same content every day. So the teams would be working to develop the lesson plans together that would be implemented both remote and in person. So if the teacher is able to stream from the classroom, we're on the same page, right? And then if that isn't the case and the teacher is teaching remotely, they would still teach the same content, still follow that same plan, just in a different platform. But the teams will be planning that together. The goal is to keep both programs on the same page.
Lisa, my question is, when you are talking about phase 3 and going remote, I know we're going to be trying to keep as much synchronous kind of lecture and available instruction to keep schedules kind of the same, but what does that look like then for teachers? Are we then teaching from our homes? Are we the only ones coming to the school building so that we can be teaching from an empty classroom? Like, how is that going to look?
Froze a little bit.
Transition back.
That's a good, so I heard you ask if you're teaching, are you teaching from your homes or are you coming into school to do that instruction?
If you went phase 3 and said, okay, all this going back to remote, does that mean all of us back to remote, or is it the students are all remote and we come into the building so that we're still like broadcasting lessons or things like that?
That's a great question. I'm not sure because can you see me again?
Yeah, you were frozen. Now
Oh, weird. Sorry, guys. So I'm going to go back to that question. So we've had 2 sets of phase 3 guidance. Remember, initially it was everybody out. And then we went to the summer and we had that guidance around we could have 10 kids in. So I don't know exactly what the state will say when we go into phase 3 again, but my guess it'll probably be down to smaller groups again and kind of maintain the summer guidance that they gave to us this year. If that's the case, then we could have teachers back in school and we could potentially bring in small groups of students, potentially with IEPs or students who need English language support, and keep them in very, very small groups and really adjust their schedule to just provide that extra support. But the answer to your question is teachers could probably do either. In phase 3, they could come to school and do that work as long as they stayed very far away from everyone else. If we went back to phase 2, let's hope we're never back there again. But my guess is nobody's coming in if we're phase 1 or 2.
I know a very big question amongst the parents is the bus, because there's rumors in District 67 that there is no bus availability. Is there the potential that there is no transportation, or is there a guarantee that there will be something?
Oh my God, I can't believe there was no slide in there about transportation. I got to add that. Yes, transportation. I don't know. I missed that. So we will be offering bus services. The rumor with Lake Forest is just a rumor. That's not true that they will not be offering bus service. So we will have students on buses. We are going, the guidance is we can have up to 50. We will be asking as many parents as possible to bring their students and drive their students to school. With that, there will be the potential, if we have a lot more parents do that, which is good for the buses because we can distance the kids more. We will probably have to adjust some traffic patterns and potentially look at staggered starts by family, not by a lot of time, but by a little bit of time, just so we can kind of ease the traffic flow coming into school. But we will be offering refunds to parents who have already signed up for transportation and won't be using it. And we will not be increasing the fee, post-registration deadline if parents want to still sign up for that. So yes, we are still offering transportation. And on the transportation, obviously, masks, distancing, seating assignments, all of that maintains.
Hey, I have a question about substitute teachers. I know there was already a sub shortage in last year and previous years, and with teachers probably expected at some point some get ill or have to quarantine. What is the plan for that?
That's another great question. I think substitutes are going to be a really hot topic for every school district everywhere. Part of the rationale of doing the shorter day alongside the safer aspect of just having everyone intermingling for shorter periods of time is to allow teachers time on the front end of their contract day, of their time that they need to be at school, to do their planning, so that we might have a little bit more flexibility of teachers covering each other during the day. Is that going to solve all the problems? No, because our teachers are still going to need breaks during that short day to make sure they can do what they need to do. We're looking creatively at it. We've also been talking with our sub pool about who's comfortable being in person, who's comfortable being remote, and obviously trying to hire as many additional subs as possible. So I don't have an answer other than to say it will probably continue to be a challenge, but we're working on it.
I have a question along the same lines. Are staff going to be given a similar form so that they can respond as to whether or not they're able to be in person, if they have maybe family members who are at high risk, or if they themselves are at high risk and it wouldn't be best practice for them to be in person?
Yeah. So staff and faculty can certainly talk with us about those individual situations. We sent out an email earlier asking folks to come and talk to us if they are in a situation like that, and we'll work with them on a case-by-case basis. We know we have a few. We have some that have already talked to us, and we're hoping that anyone else who has those issues will come and speak with us as well. It's a bit of a case-by-case basis. So yes, we'll work with any staff member who has that issue. And again, we can provide some flexibility, hoping that we will have some families choose what they did on the survey, which is to be remote. So we can look at adjusting assignments and things for that reason.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. Thanks, Kathy.
I have two questions. One is bus related and sort of start and finish time for both buildings. I know typically we have a bus that picks up the younger kids first and then does its middle school route. Would it be beneficial to more closely align the start and stop schedule of both buildings and have that bus pick up a family where you can have a brother and a sister or siblings or whatever sitting together on the bus, drop off at the middle school first, because it looks like we've got more time in the schedule in terms of while the kids are there, and then drop off at the elementary school, and then pick up elementary and then pick up middle. So you've got less distancing issues because you can share seats with families. That's question number one.
That's a good question. Yeah, go ahead.
Question number two is like whenever we have parents decide opting in for in class or remote, is there any kind of like natural time that, let's say somebody was remote and feels like, okay, we're doing a good job, can we now opt in for in-class instruction? Are we going to set up times for that, or how would that work out?
That's great. Both good questions. So the answer to question number one is, I want to look into that. That's a great suggestion. The only thing I'll say is, I think, and I'm not totally sure, but I think from the guidance, they are not considering families as still not needing to be socially distant. I'm not sure about that though, on the bus, but that's a great suggestion. So Jay's on the call and I know he heard it, so we'll talk about that later. The other one is opting in. So yes, we will be doing this by trimester. So the thing that, thank you, I need to add that to the slide. We will only be asking people to choose their choice for a trimester. So the flexibility between those two options is going to be more flexible moving out to remote than it will be in moving in person. So if a family starts from in person, wants to go remote, we're going to have less issues with that than the other way. But by trimester, we'll be giving families that opportunity. And again, we may be able to accommodate some hybrid schedules, just depends on how we are able to build our classes in person and how much distance we'll have between kids. But yeah, at this point by trimester. Thank you.
Lisa, I just had a couple questions about logistics. I know I was really happy to see that kids are going to be able to play on the playground. That's really exciting for the little brains and bodies. But I am concerned about sanitizing in between, and I wanted to know if that was a plan. And then the other idea I just had was, I know you were talking about staggered coming into the building in a staggered schedule. Could we use multiple entrances for different people and separate them out that way? So just a thought I had.
Both good thoughts. At this point, I don't believe we have plans to sanitize in between playground usage. We're kind of following the guidance that Phase 4 has given to parks. Playgrounds and parks have been able to be open, and it's kind of on families and kids to wash hands after. And, obviously that goes to our hand washing routines that we will have in school before you go outside, after you go outside. There's going to be a lot of that repetition. In terms of the multiple entrances, that's a good question. Something I have written down.
I have a question also. If I think you said July 30th is when parents are asked to respond to the survey as to whether or not they'd like to be in person or remote. If what's going to happen with the parents that don't respond? Are they automatically enrolled in one or the other?
So we'll start calling August 3rd. And then if we don't get in touch with people and we're looking at their opt-in, we're thinking they're going to be in person. We'll plan that way because we have to be more conservative on that end and think we have more people in than out. So that's how we will have to do that. But we'll be trying hard to get in touch with everyone. And they won't have to fill out the form. Like if we get on the phone with them and they just tell us what they want, that's fine too. Okay. Yeah.
If parents choose a hybrid schedule where they have some classes in person and some remote, can they choose the classes that they would like to come in person, or will it be like you're coming on blue days for like middle school and then on gold days you will be remote?
Yeah, it would be day by day. It's not going to be in for some classes and out for some portion of the day. It's going to be you're in on these days and out on those days. Yep. That's just for sanitation and things like that. And I don't know that we'll be able to accommodate hybrid schedules. I don't know how many people are interested. I've had a few parents reach out and ask about it. So I'm interested to see if we'll have a lot of folks interested in that. I'm not sure we'll be able to accommodate it, but we'll try.
I have a question. I was just thinking even just about my own kids. If a parent, if they opt for their kids to come to school in person, but there's a day that they need to stay home because they have a runny nose and nobody knows what's going on, a day, not a long length of time, but would those kids then be able to take part in the remote stuff at home so they're not missing out and don't have to make up work? You know what I'm saying?
Yep, that's a great question. Okay. Something we've talked about. So I think with the ability to participate in remote learning is going to have to do with the level of illness that the child is having, right? So if they're in person, generally speaking, and then they're not feeling well enough to come to school, that's kind of on the family to decide if they're feeling up to doing remote learning. If they are, then that option will be available to them, that because everyone will have that schedule. But if, say, we're in a situation where there's been close contact, the family needs to quarantine for 14 days, but everyone's feeling fine, we'll start with remote learning. If they end up getting sick, you can't do remote learning, let your teacher know, then you're on a sick day. And then they'll have to make that work up like they normally would. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like this offers some flexibility too, where in the past where it was everybody was in school or you're not, and then you missed school, and one day of school is a lot to make up. So this is actually, I feel like, a good alternative that they would be able to still log in and take part in their class if they couldn't come in for some reason.
Yeah, and we want to encourage folks. This is so different than school has been in the past, but we want people to stay home if they're not feeling well. We want to encourage people to stay home if they're sick and make it as easy as possible and not make it a hardship, you know, that you're missing all these things. If you can stay home, you're not feeling well, and you can kind of keep up, we want you to be able to do that.
Dr. Leali, can you talk a little bit more about the like the sports happening, like extracurriculars? If I don't know if that's just a general thought, or if you had any other ideas, like is it going to be mostly conditioning, or how that would work?
So that's changed so much even over this summer as I've been watching what's happening. So it depends on the activity, right? I'm looking at you and I'm thinking drama and singing is like a big no-no inside anywhere, but we can do it outside. You know, instrumentals we can do inside, but anyone who has a student that plays an instrument, you know about spit valves and like droplets in the air, it's crazy. So outside, we want to do those. Again, we'll have to look at what we're doing and how far we can keep kids apart and still supervise them. Athletics really started more on the flexible end of like trying to get back into it, but as we've seen, it's not working. And so a lot of those athletic programs have turned towards just conditioning. Kind of staying in your own spot and doing more conditioning and warm-ups and exercises that you can do on your own. I really think we're going to have to talk through each activity and decide how safely we can do it in person, and whether it would just be better to do it in a remote setting. So
I have a question about the special schedule. If we are still going to attack specials like we did before, will there be a shortened schedule for that, or will we take it out of the equation, seeing as we need to ramp up on the math and the reading and that kind of thing? Or will the schedule stay the same, where we still have the same amount of special time and core curriculum?
thanks, Carrie. The specials times are going to be adjusted at each building, and the way specials are organized are going to be adjusted a little bit. So again, some of this is being driven by just trying to limit the number of people who come in contact with each other each day, so that we can keep track of who's been with who. So for some of it, we're limiting the time period. So for example, you might have music for an extended period of time, and then you would switch to art, as opposed to having all of them each day. And we're also limiting the amount of time at elementary, just because of the shortened day that we would have. But I do want to emphasize that there will be work that kids can do outside of that too, because we want to keep providing that engagement for kids when they're not in school or in remote school, because it's still that shortened day. So there will still be some opportunities for kids to participate outside of the actual day.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
With the late start, is the non-classroom times in the morning, is that a possibility to be used for like special ed services, or are kiddos who, see multiple people for their needs? Or is that morning time going to be strictly for teachers and planning and ramping up and let's get the day going?
That's a great question. For the majority of teachers, that's going to be a plan time. But we have been talking a lot about students who need additional services. What we're going to try to do is be able to provide the minutes that are written into IEPs. And we can't do that entirely within the shortened day. So we're looking at opportunities to be bringing in some of those students in that early morning time, but still protecting some time for those teachers to be with their colleagues. And then they would have some time built into the actual school day for their own planning, if that makes sense.
I have one other question, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm
I
giving
think-
wait time. Am I giving good wait time, teachers?
Yes, it's awkward silence, but
I know.
I thought I read in your presentation that it's cloth masks. Is that like what we're saying? Everybody has to be in a cloth mask, the disposable surgical or whatever those are.
We're saying that we are providing the cloth masks. That's what we're
Okay.
providing to kids, 2 per person, staff and students, but they can bring ones that are comfortable for them. So the administrative team just spent 2 days in a retreat and we tried all different kinds of masks for 8-hour days. And, you know, for ourselves, found some solutions that were
Nice,
good
Kelly.
for each of us. You know, it's just going to be up to personal preference. It's really something to get used to. That's for sure.
Okay, I think I misunderstood that part of your presentation.
I probably could clarify. There's a lot on masks. That whole slide was huge, so I might try to be able to take that down to bullet points.
I think too, with the cloth masks, it's easier for people to probably get that as opposed to getting the surgical masks. It's a little cost friendlier. Because I know the preferred is surgical mask over the cloth mask for effectiveness, but it doesn't mean it's not effective. It's just less effective than the surgical, but they're very hard to come by. So I imagine it'd be easier for families to provide the cloth masks.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And, you know, I'm trying to think of how I'll be managing cloth masks in my house, adding to the laundry pile. Or if I'm just going to buy a bunch more, like, you know, other items of clothing that I do. So I do less laundry, but yeah.
Speaking of masks, I know we had talked at one of our other task force meetings about the possibility of clear masks. I just asked that, especially as a language teacher, because it's really hard to understand what I'm saying anyway. And it's helpful if they can see my mouth, you know, obviously with lots of other areas like speech and language, that type of thing.
Yes, we are looking into those. Unfortunately, the supplies are limited on some of those kinds of items, but we've already started the research and are trying to work with each group. Tracy's been great about kind of telling us the needs of the student services teachers and specialized staff. So we're in the process. And I just want to make it clear, you know, we want to make sure everyone is safe first, but also feels safe and, you know, has what they need to be able to come back to school. So we'll work with any staff member who feels like they want an additional layer of protection, or, you know, there's lots of different options that we have, and we will work with you. So think about the interactions that you usually have, what you would feel comfortable with: gloves, gowns, face shields. You know, we can add things. It's really about comfort level. We know what works. You know, the masks work, the distancing works. If there's other pieces, we'll work with you on that too.
I have a question about the assessment plan. I know you mentioned it in the slide that we're planning to do learning assessments in the fall and throughout the year, but do we know exactly what that's going to look like, or is that something we're still working on?
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like yet. We actually are asking for some teacher volunteers to help us draft what that is going to look like, between universal assessments and individual, you know, classroom-based assessments and things like that. I mean, the majority of classroom-based assessments will probably be driven by the team. But in terms of looking at universal screeners and things like that, I want to get a team together to talk about that, because some of our universal assessments really should be done in person, one-to-one, like an IRI. Some of our social emotional screeners, and some could be done remotely and just fine that way. So we'll be working with teachers on that. It's a great question. We're actually going to be working with a bunch of teacher teams to figure out some of these logistics, because between, you know, knowing our buildings is, you guys know better than anyone inside and out. So we'll be working with a lot of teachers in the coming month to figure out the logistics.
Lisa, I have a question just about, I know that we putting the social emotional piece into the day. We have our second step curriculum that we have had done and taught by normally the social worker. Is that going to look differently, or is there some other program or things that we're looking at using, or getting a group of teachers to figure out what's going to be best, since this is going to look different than it has before? And obviously for pre-K and kindergarten kiddos coming in, they're in a new place, and so it is going to look a lot differently. So I just figured I'd ask about what that might look like.
It's a good question. I believe that Tracy's touched base with social workers and psychs to talk through some of this initially, not all of it. And we still need to work on that. So I have it down, something we're going to need to address. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have cubbies and lockers been addressed yet? As far as, I mean, my input would be, let's not use them. And if kids are going to be contained primarily in one classroom a day, maybe their belongings will be stored in, you know, a specific area of the classroom, so there's not a lot of interaction, but maybe going to cubbies or lockers is kind of a tough thing to do, to socially distance.
Yep. So we've toured through the buildings, and that was definitely an area that we were like, this doesn't seem like this is going to be too safe. So we are going to, when we can, organize kids' materials in their rooms, by their desks or their space, because remember, even in middle school, the kids aren't going to be moving. So they will be in one spot in a space, hopefully be able to contain most of their materials there. The issue becomes winter. And when we start having, you know, if we're in, when we start having coats and all those things, there's potential to use them, but stagger kids going out to the lockers and only do it twice a day, when they get here and when they go home. And same for the cubbies. I just don't see us being able to handle snow pants and boots and coats and hats and all those things at their space. So we'll probably have to use the cubbies, but keep it limited and stagger the amount of kids going to them.
I would think it would be helpful too to, you know, thinking that essentially we want to try and push to make more things remote, that we're going to limit what we want them to bring home too. You know what I mean? So like if we can, and I know that you guys, the administrators, were organizing groups of teachers to work on the supply thing. And if we can get them to keep their stuff in their space daily and limit, maybe they're just taking home their device every night and that's it, then hopefully like something like that would help.
That's a great point. Yep. That's a great point. I mean, I think the thing this year is going to be minimalist. We're going to try to do the most with the least this year, because the more stuff you have, the more you have to clean and, you know, all those things. So trying to limit the materials and interactions, we're just going to kind of a minimalist approach. Maybe have time for one more question if anyone's got one. And this isn't your last opportunity. You can always email.
I have another question, Lisa.
Yep.
About the technology piece. It would be one, like getting the incoming pre-K and kindergartners their devices, and also our kindergartners and first grades, like just wondering about the support classroom teachers are going to have from those of us who have been using Seesaw onto Google Classroom, if that is what we're going to be using and what that will look like instead.
Yep, that's a good question. So that Institute week, and we'll hopefully be able to provide some more before that if people can. But certainly that Institute 5 days, August 18th through the 24th, we'll be offering a lot of opportunities for teachers to get some support, professional development, and then we can also work through some grade specific issues and where you're feeling like you would need the support during the day for either in-person or remote, probably some parent support as well. there's pluses and minuses to Seesaw. We had a really long conversation about it. I've used it as a mom, and I've used it as an educator, and the same for Google Classroom. And then also I had experience with Canvas last year, so different learning management systems. There's pros and cons to all of them. I think for the student experience and the family experience in a remote setting, the goal was to try to create consistency where we could, but we will give you the support you need to try. We're going to have a group come together and try to look at the features that Seesaw had that maybe Google Classroom doesn't just yet, and where we can provide some plug-in support so that, for example, you would be able to, one of our administrators brought voice comments. We know your kiddos can't read your comments. So having a plug-in available for you to just put those comments in with your voice, try to maintain some consistency. So we'll be looking at that with teacher groups too.
Thank you, Lisa.
Of course. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap us up here. It's 2 o'clock. Again, this isn't the last opportunity. If you want to reach out with any other questions, please do so. This pretty much what you saw in a very, very brief version is what will be presented to the board. I don't see us making a ton of major revisions before next week. So, but if you do have more questions, I have my list here of the questions that you guys asked. They were all great. And I just can't thank you enough for spending a week with an hour with me every week to go through this, and with the administrative team, because it helps us a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.